Who's gonna win this year's NBA championship? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoy this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. We're coming upon a very exciting time in the NBA. The NBA preseason just started, the NBA regular season is just around the corner. We're coming off a very exciting NBA free agency where there's a ton of new players on different teams, and it's going to be very exciting to see how they actually play for all their individual teams that they just joined this offseason. In my opinion, I think this upcoming season is definitely going to be a very, very interesting season and probably one of the most exciting seasons we've seen in some time. But let's get straight into it. Who do I personally think is going to win the NBA championship this upcoming season? So there's going to be a ton of teams that are going to be in contention to potentially win an NBA championship this next season, but in my opinion, just to narrow it down, I would say teams I would consider in contention to win the championship are the Los Angeles Lakers, the Brooklyn Nets, the Milwaukee Bucks, Phoenix Suns, Utah Jazz. Out of the teams mentioned, I think there's a very good possibility that one of those teams will win an NBA championship after this next season ends. So first, let's start with the Milwaukee Bucks. Of course, they're coming off a fantastic season where they just won the NBA championship. Giannis looked amazing, Chris Middleton looked amazing, Drew Holiday looked amazing. They have some very talented players in this roster. But what are their actual chances to run it back and actually win another NBA championship this season? I think a lot of people can agree with me on this one, but last season it was very shocking that the Milwaukee Bucks were actually able to win the championship, at least to me in my opinion. When they went up in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Brooklyn Nets, I thought they would probably lose in 5, 6, maybe 7 games, but the fact that they were actually able to take it from the Nets in 7 games was very shocking to me. Although of course injuries played a big factor, a lot of the Nets stars were injured in that series, which probably was the reason why the Bucks were able to win it, but either way it was still very impressive. And then even going into that finals matchup against the Phoenix Suns, I thought the Phoenix Suns were definitely the favorites in that series, and once again I thought the Suns would win in maybe 6 games, maybe 7 games, but of course the Milwaukee Bucks actually beat the Phoenix Suns as well and actually won the NBA championship. So what I'm trying to get at by explaining this is, of course the Milwaukee Bucks do have the potential to actually shock everybody and win an NBA championship. But with that being said, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for the Milwaukee Bucks to win an NBA championship this season compared to last season. But when you talk about the Brooklyn Nets coming back fully healthy, you talk about the Los Angeles Lakers now adding some new players. Hopefully they'll be healthy as well, adding Russell Westbrook. You talk about the Utah Jazz having some more experience under their belts. There's just a bunch of other teams, both in the Western and Eastern Conference, that got a ton better in my opinion. And I think it's just going to be a lot more difficult for the Bucks to actually win an NBA championship and really go back to back. The Bucks have proven the ability to win an NBA championship, but currently at this point it's kind of hard for me to pick them to win an NBA championship. I think there's other teams that I would probably have higher up on my list. Now let's move on to the Utah Jazz. So the Jazz are a team that I recently made a video on why they weren't getting enough respect from the media and why they are true championship contenders going forward. Looking at the roster, you see some amazing players. Of course you start with Donovan Mitchell, who's a young up-and-coming player who already at this point in his career is a true NBA superstar, and it appears that each and every season he's getting better year after year, which is exactly what you want to see from your star players. So I would assume all that playoff experience that he had under his belt under the previous few seasons, but specifically last season where they came up a little shorter than they would have liked to, losing to the Los Angeles Clippers in last year's playoffs, I think that would definitely help this team going forward, just having that experience under their belts, and I think they're going to be a much better team this season than they were last season. But looking at other guys on the roster, of course you talk about Rudy Gobert, a fantastic defender, one of the best defenders we have in the NBA, a great rebounder as well, and definitely a player you want to have on your team rather than not. Joe Ingles, he's a very good player, he's a great ball handler, a great shooter. Jordan Clarkson, one of the best scorers we have in the NBA coming off the bench, and probably one of the best bench players we have in the NBA. Bogdanovich, fantastic 3-point shooter, can also create his own shot. And overall, the reason why I put the Utah Jazz in the contender category for next season is not only do they have stars at the top in terms of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, they're also very well rounded in terms of the starters they have besides the 2 stars, and also looking at their bench unit, they have a very good bench unit as well. But even besides their very deep roster, they're one of the best coached teams in the NBA. Whenever you watch a Utah Jazz game, you always know you're going to get a great defensive effort for them each and every night. But on the offensive side of the ball, they're very efficient and effective as well. They run great sets, they get wide open shots for guys in the corner, guys at the wing, guys cutting all the way to the basket. They're always going to run amazing plays that make it so tough on the opposing defense. They have fantastic ball movement in general, just taking so much pressure off their star players. And overall, this Jazz team team is one of the best well-coached teams in the NBA. And overall, I definitely think this Jazz team is a very good team and definitely a true NBA championship contender, and I could see them shocking the world and actually winning an NBA championship. But similar to the Milwaukee Bucks, there's some other teams on this list that I would pick over the Utah Jazz. But now let's talk about the Phoenix Suns. So very similar to the Milwaukee Bucks, the Suns impressed a lot of people and made it all the way to the NBA Finals. They got past some very good teams, including the Los Angeles Lakers, the Los Angeles Clippers, and then eventually making it all the way to the NBA Finals, where they faced the Milwaukee Bucks. So actually entering that NBA Finals, the Suns were the favorites. A lot of people thought the Suns just had a lot more talent and they played a lot better than the Milwaukee Bucks, and they would eventually win the championship. And although the finals didn't go the way the Suns would have liked to, and of course they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, I think the experience of making it all the way to the NBA Finals was fantastic for every single player in that roster, but specifically the younger players on the team. Now all those younger guys understand what it takes to not only make it to the playoffs and win a few rounds in the playoffs, but actually knows what it takes to make it all the way to the NBA Finals, and now they probably have a better understanding what it takes to actually win an NBA championship going forward. And if they ever were to make it to that position again in terms of making it to the finals, I think they would be way better prepared now than they would have been last season going into the finals. And I think the Suns definitely going into this season are going to be very determined and very motivated to actually make it back to the NBA Finals and actually win a championship this season. But once again, I think there's some other teams on the list that I mentioned before that just have a better chance at winning an NBA championship going into the season, at least at this point in my opinion. But the reason why I wanted to include the Suns in this video was I definitely think there's a chance that the Suns are crowned champions at the end of the season. But now let's move on to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now just coming off an NBA championship, this previous season didn't end the way they would have liked to. They had a ton of injuries going into the season, they had a ton of injuries going into the playoffs, and they were only able to make it to the 8th seed, and they ended up losing to the Phoenix Suns in the first round. And you can expect both LeBron James and Anthony Davis to be very determined going into this season, based on how poorly their season went last year. But even besides LeBron and AD being very energized going into this season, the Lakers actually added a ton of pieces as well this offseason. The biggest move they made was of course bringing in Russell Westbrook, but even besides him, they brought Carmelo Anthony that brings a ton of shooting, and in my opinion that was a very important signing for them. They brought back Rajon Rondo, which was a very good pickup for them. They also brought back Dwight Howard. They brought in a guy in Malik Monk that's a great scorer coming off the bench as well as a very good shooter. Kendrick Nunn, a nice young point guard. Trevor Ariza, a pretty good 3-and-D player even at this point in his career. They just brought some very nice players in this offseason, which makes them a way better team than they were this previous season. But what these moves provide more than anything else is just depth to this roster. And now maybe during the regular season you can give a guy like AD and LeBron some more rest when last season you might not have been able to. You can rely on a guy like Russell Westbrook that you just brought in and is still a superstar in this league to really take over the reins and win you some regular season games, as well as some of the other additions they added to their team. Honestly, the biggest part of all these signings is just to keep both AD and LeBron fresh going into the playoffs. That's the biggest key for them. And going into this season, a lot of people definitely have the Lakers as championship favorites and their pick to actually win the NBA championship. And in my opinion, I definitely think all those picks are certainly very valid. Looking at this Lakers roster from the starters to the bench, I think they have probably the most talented or one of the most talented rosters in the NBA, and that does include the Brooklyn Nets roster, although they're very close. And it's very easy to say that this Lakers team definitely has a fantastic chance to win an NBA championship this season. But now moving on to the last and final team of this video, which is the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are also coming off a pretty disappointing season last year. Although they made it all the way to the NBA Finals, when you have three superstars in Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, you're expected to win a championship, and it's always championship or bust for a team like that. But I think it's very clear the reason why the Nets didn't do better last season, and it didn't at the very least make it to the NBA Finals, was more so due to injuries than anything else. When KD, Kyrie, and also James Harden were all on the court at the same time, I think it was very clear that they were the most scary team in the NBA by far. Just talking about the individual talent on the team is scary enough, but when you consider that all three of these players, honestly, they really bought into their team and played team basketball, that makes them even more dangerous by far. When you see these guys play together, they were sharing the ball very efficiently and effectively. Not one guy was completely taking over and demanding the ball and getting upset if they didn't get the ball. You would see KD spotting up from the corner, from the wing. You would see Kyrie spotting up as well, James Harden spotting up, and you would see them let each other work and truly just play within the offense. And that was one of the big questions once they got both KD and Kyrie, and then eventually getting James Harden. The biggest question was, could these guys actually play together? I know there's a ton of talent on the team, but sometimes when you have star players on your team that all demand the ball, it doesn't always work out. But in the limited games these guys played together, all three of them, I think they made it very clear that they're willing to play within the offense, which is very scary for the rest of the NBA going into this season. But between both the Nets and the Lakers, I think it's basically a coin toss to decide who would actually win the championship this upcoming season, at least in my opinion. If I did have to guess, I would probably have to go with the Brooklyn Brooklyn Nets. I just think the 3 superstars they have are just so talented and prove the ability to play within the offense, and that's just going to be so dangerous going forward. But I think it's also going to be a fantastic matchup between the Lakers and the Nets in the NBA Finals, barring some crazy injuries or barring some team completely overachieving and taking over one of these two teams, or maybe both of these two teams don't make it to the finals. We'll see what happens. But currently at this point, before the NBA season starts, I have it down to the Lakers and Nets, and if I had to guess, I would probably have to pick the Brooklyn Nets to win the NBA championship this upcoming season. Although I'm a huge Knicks fan, as some of you may know, and as much as it pains me to pick the Nets to win the championship, I just think they have too much talent. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you guys think of my list of the contenders that I had, and what do you think of my opinion that the Nets are going to win the championship? Do you agree with that? Do you think a different team is going to win the championship? Do you think a different team outside of the list that I mentioned will win the championship this upcoming season? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.